Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the technology panel. There won't be any PowerPoint discussions in the next 20 to 25 minutes. This is a rare gathering of 4 distinctive leaders, and as you will know later, their responsibilities go beyond Asia Pacific. They will dissect what business technologies are trending now, and you've heard about terms like the nexus of forces and the third platform, and how we can prepare for this. I will start by introducing our panelists and later on asking them to answer one critical question. To my right is Andrew Spurgeon. He's the Growth Markets Brand Executive for IBM, and he's based in Wellington.
Correct. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And to his right is Steve Patak. Steve is Director, Service Provider, Partner Organization for Asia Pacific, Japan, and Greater China for Cisco, and he's based in Singapore.
Thanks.
And to his right is Marc Spiotta. He's Specialist Sales Director, Asia Pacific, Microsoft. He's also based in Singapore.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And the fourth panelist is Paul Lamb. He's General Manager, Converged Cloud Enterprise Group, South Pacific for Hewlett-Packard, and is based in Sydney. So let's start with a challenge. I'll hurl a challenge to each and every one of you. I'm giving you 3 minutes each to take on the persona of a futurist. I know it's one of the hardest jobs on the planet today, but try to be a pragmatic one. Try to think of a trend that you've seen in other parts of the world that you think organizations here in New Zealand, governments, finance, retail, should prepare for.
Look, there's a lot of ways to answer that question, and I'm a bit of a technology junkie. And there's a lot of trends happening already. We're in the cloud, we're into bring your own device. And one, I think, reference point that I will go back to is every year IBM conducts a survey to CEOs. And in 2012, it was the first time that technology became the #1 priority and the #1 issue for CEOs across the globe. And the reason for that is today we are more connected, more inspected, we are more attached to devices than we ever have before. And the reality is, many of customers that I speak to, and I'll use the term, they're floating on a sea of data, but they're dying of thirst. And so I think the biggest trend that we are going to see, and I think there's a new evolution in data analytics. And I'll refer back to a game show that some of you may have seen called Jeopardy! If you haven't seen the game show, go to YouTube, type IBM Watson and Jeopardy! And this is where technology has evolved to the point where through natural communication, you can ask or give an answer, and it'll actually give you the question. In a lot of cases with analytics, we actually want to know what is the question. And so this is going to be one of the fundamental ways that business is going to gain competitive advantage by using analytics, using all of this connected data going forward in the future. So that's one. The other one is in terms of the fundamental challenge we have today between what business is asking of IT and what IT is able to deliver in terms of deploying new IT assets and doing it in a predictable and a secure way. And the other technology that IBM has delivered is something called patterns. And if you attend the IBM presentation later on Pure Systems, you'll see that IBM has now developed a technology to deploy IT assets and applications in a best practice format, packaged and deployable as an IT asset for businesses today. We have over 350 ISVs, and some of them based here in New Zealand, with applications that are ready to deploy, taking the time from weeks down to minutes. And so I think there's 2 trends there. One is analytics and a new phase in analytics, and the other one is application deployment and using smart technologies to remove business risk and improve agility.
So I'm going to touch a bit on a theme that we've heard today, but first, as a futurist, I have got to look at technology trends that are going to be as profitable as they are on going to help the planet. And it seems like for me personally, as of late, important people in my life have been doing their fair share. My wife recently has become vegetarian because she thinks it's a kinder way to live. So every time we go to dinner, I get yelled at for eating meat, whether you believe that or not. That's her, that's her role of giving back. My best friend growing up started a company where he's giving a pair of shoes, and every pair of shoes he sells, he's giving to someone in need. So this next trend for us, which we've talked a little bit, is especially exciting for me because I can go back to both of them and say, Cisco has the ability to do our part, and that is in the Internet of Everything. And I think Greg touched on that just a bit. But we do look at right now, of all physical objects that could be connected to the internet, less than 1% actually are. And we're using a number about 2010, 40 to 50 billion devices will be connected. And this is going to change industries like healthcare. It's going to change how we consume electricity. It's going to change the environment and generally, productivity in general. And there was a couple of examples earlier given. I like two. Maybe just for me, I like two. One is your doctor is now going to be able to remotely monitor your vital signs through sensors that you wear in your clothes, which might be good for my heart rate. And second is your alarm might be intelligent enough if there's really bad traffic on the way to the office to wake you up 15 minutes earlier to get there. But regardless of what the example is, once we start connecting the unconnected, the value of those connections are going to be so much more relevant. I think we just heard that from our prior speaker. So you're going to hear today around technologies that are going to help drive that. You're going to hear about cloud. You're going to hear about mobility, video. We've talked about big data, all of which our company has a play in. But what we hear from our customers are, what do we do about this? This sounds great. Conceptually, this is great. It's a great vision. My peers probably agree. It sounds good. But what is a pragmatic approach that we should take? We believe that in the next decade, this is a $14 trillion industry. And so in order to really understand the pragmatic approach you need to take, you have to understand where the buckets of those profits are coming from. And there's going to be a couple of areas. One, it's going to be around, you're going to be able to more effectively utilize your assets and improve your processes. You're going to be able to give your customers much more rich customer experiences and gain market share by adding new customers. You're going to be able to see more productivity from your employees, and you're going to be able to have a better ROI and time to market because you're going to be able to innovate in a way that you've never been able to innovate before. So if I was a New Zealand business owner, I would be asking myself, how do I lead this evolution? Because although we're just in the beginning, it absolutely has begun.
Picking up on some of the thoughts that Stephen just mentioned there. I mean, so we have these four major mega trends that we've talked about a couple times today, right? Data, big data, the cloud, mobile, and social. If I'm a futurist and I'm thinking forward to, whatever timeline you want to think about, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, there's a couple things that I would say are really important for not only enterprises, but also organizations, government organizations, NGOs to be thinking about right now. These technologies in and of themselves, they're wonderful things, but they're not where the value lies. It's how they're enabled that's going to bring value to the end users as well as to the organizations that embrace them. We see that today. We see it in all different parts of the world in the degree to which these things are interconnected. If I think about the approach that Microsoft is taking to these four megatrends, it's that we think that our customers are going to embrace them and move forward with them at different paces. And it's not requirement that you jump fully into the cloud immediately, that you mobilize everything, that you put that everything is done via social and you turn off your email. That doesn't have to happen overnight. But it is important that you define the pace at which you're going to embrace these things and that you're communicative about that. The one that sticks out for me in particular is social. I think big data, mobile, and cloud, we all kind of have our heads around that to some degree, but social, from an organization perspective, we're just at the beginning. And that's both how we interact with our customers and our constituents, but also how we leverage social internally and how we unlock some of the human capital that we all have within our organizations. From a Microsoft perspective, we have kind of three guiding principles that we put forth in any of these trends, and really it's around familiarity. We want people to be interacting with applications and interfaces that are familiar and easy for them to use. It's around flexibility, as I mentioned. We don't think everything needs to be in the cloud. We don't think everything has to be accessed mobilely. That's up to our customers to decide that. And the last one is commitment to enterprise and commitment to large organizations and to government agencies. Despite the slide at the beginning of the show, I would argue that it takes a little longer than a couple years to be established as an enterprise credible player. So that's something that Microsoft's done for quite some time, and we remain committed to that focus. Lastly, on the social front, what I would say is If you see how people are embracing these technologies today externally, we can't expect them to come to work and shut that off, right? The way that they decide where they're going to go to a movie or where they're going to go to dinner is done very quickly, usually with one hand, interacting with somebody that may have seen that movie before or been to that restaurant. Likewise, business decisions can be made in that same fashion, and there's an opportunity for each and every one of us to not only figure out how to leverage that to the best needs of our individual organizations, but also to communicate it out. And Microsoft and our partners here on the stage have solutions that can help you do that.
I'm a futurist. I'm looking in sort of 2 to 3 years, and I'm looking back at what just happened. And what happened was a bunch of organizations didn't get their plan right. They didn't get where they needed to get right. And they're either not here with us anymore, or they've been bought, or they've been merged. So really, the point of what I'd like to make today is maybe let's just settle ourselves and think about 2 or 3 things that we must do. Now, I love the stat right up front when the minister showed us that, about 65% of the citizens in New Zealand are purchasing online, and only 25% of companies have a presence or value that presence. That's completely out of whack. And perhaps when we think about how do we get to that outcome, we need to think of it in a couple of different frames. So let me think about this. Maybe the back end, what happens in our IT organizations, in our data centers, getting to the cloud, getting to consumption-based models, and the front end, what happens when we try to connect to our customers, our constituents, our communities. Let's think about that maybe. What's happening to you today, the millstone tied around our necks as an industry, what's happening to you and happening to us, is the legacy, the capabilities that we hang on to because we perceive them to be very important. And as that's going on, at the same time, we're being dragged kicking and screaming to go cloud, cloud, cloud. But cloud is not the right answer every time. If cloud is an agility question for you, we need to be clear on what type of agility we need to achieve. If cloud is a cost measurement for you, we need to understand what the economics are. And in fact, if I could ask you to go away today with point number 1, this always happens to me. Someone will go back to the HP guy or your account manager, Jenna, and say, what did that little fat guy from HP say? It's this. Get really clear on the services that you want to execute and the economics behind that service. And if you can't do that, speak to us and let us help you do that. The second part of this is getting over onto the front foot. If we think about the difference between what governments do and what enterprises do and break that down into an IT type function, governments tend to collaborate, bring forward citizens to work together. And organizations tend to run transactions. They want you to do something with them. And a lot of the examples that we've seen today as up on the screens have helped us bear that out. The strategy, the second piece of advice, the second key thing that the organisation that's working well in 3 years' time has done is, as a government organisation, has worked out a way to bring citizens together. Yes, we can work out a way to get a pipe fixed and get an emergency team there in a hurry. Yes, we can work out how to store the police video files that I saw on the TV last night and work out a way using big data techniques to drag them and interrogate them. But what about the bit of getting our citizens to work together, to collaborate, to build consumptive models to look after each other? And the work of Rachel Botsman, which we're using quite a lot at HP, helps us to establish that through some of our digital cities initiatives. Digital cities isn't about putting a browser in every parking meter. It's about making sure our citizens can collaborate. I think one of the great examples that we saw in the ASB example was a bank as a transactional organisation moving in to help people transact more effectively through social media terms.
Thank you, Paul. I like the idea that you cited the local organization that has been maximizing some of these trends. From your experiences, you talk with customers across the globe. Can you name a company that has, latched onto a trend, benefited from it, or another is some of the companies that we didn't see here, those that failed to change their business model and are suffering the consequences? I'd like you to think of one example that all the people here can learn from. Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of analytics and in terms of rapid deployment of applications, I think one of the companies is Aviarc, which is a New Zealand-based software company that has spotted the opportunity in working with IBM around patterns technology. And so if you're an Aviarc customer, they've got on it early. We have over 350 ISVs now part of that program. And if you're an Aviarc customer, again, New Zealand-based, they can deploy that asset, that application very, very quickly indeed. So they've spotted an opportunity, and that's very indicative of New Zealand thinking, right? We have to get in early, we have to be competitive if we're going to survive. Reality in this market, everybody is connected. It doesn't matter where you are on the globe. I've got a growth markets role, and I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand. So companies that get in early, like Aviarc, can spot the opportunity, can grow, and have a global presence, even if you are based in New Zealand.
I'm going to take the angle of a large global company we all know, which is GE. A great deal of respect for GE. Their CEO often says innovation is awesome, and they're doing it as good as anyone. They say if we can improve efficiency by 1%, then we could save $300 billion across 4 or 5 different industries in the next 15 years. And I think from an aviation perspective, they're doing some very interesting things in aviation. I fly all the time, so I'm just a bit fascinated by aviation. But they put computer devices inside the hot sections of engines to do real-time analytics and use those analytics to filter back to the airlines on how airlines can save operational expenses. They know exactly the fuel consumption, they know the speed, they know the trajectory of the airplanes, and they can suggest the optimal way for airlines to fly in order to save millions of dollars. And if that, there's certain parts on the plane, they can detect weathering, et cetera, and it's fascinating to me, the innovation they're showing that industry and what it's doing for that industry.
So it's GE's fault that the Dreamliner's grounded then?
Maybe
Not
so.
enough analytics.
That's right.
That's right. So a couple of examples, Divina. One is not necessarily New Zealand specific, and then I have one that is. So actually, I'm from the U.S. originally. I live in Singapore now. But I had a heartwarming moment at the beginning of the presentation. The newscaster that introduced, what was it called? Friendshopper.com. That's a woman named Sue Simmons, who's a longtime New York newscaster. And with the recent big storm that took place in New York, Superstorm Sandy, I think they call it, it was very hard to get information from what was going on in New York, and I was longing to see her face on the TV. But where I got most information from, and as most people did, was from Facebook and Twitter. And these social applications that not only became ways for people to communicate, but for people who didn't necessarily know each other to share information. If I compare and contrast that to other natural disasters and emergency responses that have happened prior, we haven't had that. I mean, there are stories now out about literally how lives have been saved and people have been helped at a much quicker pace because of enabling social technology, not only on the end user or customer facing, but also internally. Right, and another example here. I think ASB must have paid somebody today, because in another example from Microsoft perspective, I know Candace talked earlier about how they are so innovative from a customer perspective. They're also innovative internally. I mean, they've standardized on Microsoft SharePoint 2013 as their internal social and collaborative platform, and it's a way that they're allowing their employees to access each other better and make decisions faster and in a more communicative fashion. So I think we're seeing those technologies embraced day in and day out here in New Zealand. Thank you.
I think one of my favorites is an organization called TaskRabbit. There's a few more of these around now, but the ability to pop up a task, I need my dog walked, I need my IKEA furniture built, I need my kids babysat, maybe, who would bid for the task? And then from a community perspective, bringing together communities to community source tasks to be done locally. On the business side, one of my favourite examples is Fortescue Metals Group, an Australian company. It's interesting because it's kind of similar in primary industry. You need to move very rapidly when something new occurs or if there's a change in the industry. And Fortescue have been able to use the back-end technologies, cloud technologies, in a private environment. They don't want to be out in the public cloud consuming, but they want to build private cloud capabilities to give them that agility to move very quickly.
Now my last challenge is for you is I'm giving you like a few seconds each. If you know that New Zealand is a very cost-sensitive part of the world, and if there is one thing, that organizations here, particularly in Wellington, could invest in, it could be a technology, it could be getting a certain skill in the IT department or with executive team in the next 6 months. Just one, name one. What would it be, Andrew?
You mentioned skill, and I think you're absolutely right.
Yes.
The half-life of skill, shelf life is very, very small. If you go to university today, by the time you finish your degree in information technology, by the time you graduate, you're kind of out of date. So skill, absolutely, and I think curiosity. In this market, we have to be, and in this country, we need to be curious to find the opportunities to grow our business.
Invest in your partnerships. Take the core of what you do for your business and leverage your partnerships for technologies that we've talked about today. And I really believe around cloud, there's not a right answer for everyone. It's a path to get there, but lean on partners like Janai to help you get there.
Marc.
One common theme that comes out in addition to cost efficacy and saving money, whenever we talk to customers, whether it's government agencies, airlines, financial institutions, they want to be closer to their customers. They want to bring the customer closer and understand better how to service their needs. Likewise, I would say that's the same thing for the gentleman here on the stage, myself included. So my one suggestion would be, when it comes to these 4 big megatrends, define for your organization how you're going to leverage them to get closer to your customer, and then communicate that out internally so that everyone knows what we're aiming for.
And then my focus would be get learning fast, learn at the back end on how to get agile, get the economics right around your infrastructure today so you're ready, and at the front end, get out there and collaborate hard. Get those transactions working in social, get those communities working together collaboratively in the public space.
Thank you.